you telling me a story about you having three kids and you you couldn't tell the landlord you had three kids?
Not back them days.
Why couldn't you tell the landlord you had three children?
With one bedroom, it was one bedroom, but the kids were small, and that's what I could afford.
Right.
So when the kids came home, they had to take the shoes off and be still. No running, because if they heard the little footsteps running across the floor, they're going to tell the landlord they heard noise upstairs. So somebody did. Then the landlord forced me out of my apartment by cutting my water off.
Wow.
Yes, he did.
In Louisville, there was a white homeowner in a suburb of Louisville called Shively, a single-family home suburb on the outskirts of Louisville, who had an African-American friend who was living in the central city of Louisville, renting an apartment. The African-American friend was a decorated Navy veteran. He had a wife and a daughter, a good job. He wanted to move to a single-family home, but as de facto segregation tells us, nobody would sell one to him. So the white family, the white homeowner, bought a second home in this suburb of Shively and resold it to his African-American friend. In those days, that was about the only way that African-Americans ever moved into white neighborhoods, as if a white family bought a home and then resold it to an African-American. And when the African-American family moved in to this single-family home in Shively, an angry mob of white neighbors surrounded the home, protected by the police. They threw rocks through the windows. They dynamited and firebombed the home. Despite the fact that police were present, they couldn't identify a single perpetrator. And when the riot was all over, the state of Kentucky arrested, tried, convicted, and jailed with a 15-year sentence the white homeowner for sedition, for having sold a home to an African-American family. And I said to myself, this doesn't sound to me much like de facto segregation. Maybe there's something that Chief Justice John Roberts doesn't know about the history of how this happened that's worth investigating. And so I began the investigation that led to the book, The Color of Law, that Robert mentioned. And what I concluded was that not only were there thousands of cases like this, and I'm not exaggerating, I use the word deliberately, thousands of cases of mob violence protected by the police to drive African Americans out of white neighborhoods. But there were many, many other federal, state, and local policies, racially explicit policies, that were designed to ensure that African Americans and whites could not live near one another in urban areas. It's not to say that there wasn't bigotry involved. Of course there was private bigotry. But there were so many public policies that were equally as powerful as the policies of segregated restaurants and lunch counters and buses and schools, that we have that de facto segregation is an utter myth. We have a de jure system, to use the court's term,